Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I know it's been a while. Thank you all for your patience, but I'm really excited to be here today because I have a guest. And she and I know each other actually because we trained with the same human design teacher, and so we became readers um, for Jenna Zoe, and so yes, so my guest name is Xenia, and she's a 6-2 manifesting generator, and she's a human design reader and has these really beautiful sessions called heart to heart sessions. Is that right?
Yeah, sacred
Yeah,
heart to heart.
that's right. Sacred heart to heart. Yeah, I've read about those. Those sound really lovely. And she's also recently written a book called The Universe is an Art Project, which is all about creativity and kind of fostering that in people. So I'm really excited to touch on this with you and to explore the theme of creativity. That's primarily why we're here today, but we'll see where it goes. So yeah, so thank you so much for being here, Xenia.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So is there anything that you'd like to tell us about yourself that I left out? Or you want to introduce the book to us?
Yeah, sure. So I have this thing I love to do, which is when I introduce myself, I love to talk about the meaning of my names because I just think it's really
Mm,
fun.
okay.
So I'm I was born in the Philippines, but I was raised pretty much in the Northeast, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and lived my whole adult life in New York. But my first name is Greek, and it means kindness to strangers because they
Mm,
might be gods or goddesses.
mm.
And it also has to do with gifts you give to strangers. So it's kind of like the opposite of xenophobia, is the idea of xenia.
Oh my
And
gosh,
I know, isn't it interesting? And
that's incredible.
I learned that kind of later in my, like when I was an older teenager, but also my parents picked my name to start with an X because I was the 10th grandchild on both sides of my
Oh,
family. So
oh
they
my
wanted,
gosh.
yeah, Roman numeral X. And it's interesting because they read it in a book because it was the 80s, you know?
Yeah.
So people always ask me how to say my name, and my name is hugely made up in a sense because
Mm.
my parents say it differently than I do. We never really
Oh,
heard a Greek person say it. And this kind of just ties into my theme of like this idea of how much we negotiate and how much is made up and how I look at creativity. So I wanted to share that.
that's a perfect intro. Thank you.
I would also add that I'm really passionate about building community. And it's not something I really ever identified with. It's just something I did naturally. And people started to come to me and say, well, I know it's a huge part of your mission to build community. So do you want to partner with me in this way? So
Mm.
I just want to add that that is another thing that I love to do, which is why it's so cool. The way that we met was like basically learning in community.
Yeah, yeah. Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So can you tell us a little bit about your book, because you've just sent out shipments, the first shipments of it, of people that ordered it. Were these pre-orders?
Yeah, they were all
Okay.
pre-orders.
Okay.
I just shipped those out. And honestly, it's really funny because there was such a level of satisfaction as an MG in actually doing this very challenging kind of repetitive task for me. I was like, wow, I never knew I could be so fulfilled in wrapping and
Mm,
shipping books. But so the book is called The Universe is an Art Project. And in mid 2020, I had this idea that I really wanted to write a book. And like so many people in 2020, my life had slowed down so much
yeah.
that I really started to ask myself, like, what is important to you? Like,
Mm,
what do you really care about? And the thing I've always wanted more than anything is to write a book. And I write all the time, I write every day, but there was something in my head that created a block when I called it a book instead of like 2,000 Instagram posts, which is like no problem for me.
yeah. Yeah.
So I collated all these essays I gathered from years and I sent them to a writing coach. And the writing coach, basically, she was amazing. She's a manifester, but I realized in that moment that I had to start all over when she
Oh,
gave me the
okay.
feedback that she did, not because of what she was saying, but because I just sort of felt like I needed to let things come through instead of gather and
Mm,
organize.
okay.
Yeah. And so that when I actually wrote the book, it took me, I think it was like maybe 3 weeks. And it just poured out. Like it was
Mm,
really easy. And everything I'd done before that was such a struggle trying to contort myself and configure things and
mm,
strategize. And this was just like, it just flowed. And when I looked back at it, I realized that I was just writing about creativity, but that wasn't something I tried to do. It's just what happened. And what's important to me, and I think this is just such an interesting trait of mine, is I really like to pull everyone all the way back before we start a conversation and really get clear on definitions.
yes.
I feel like with Instagram and so many important things being talked about in that space, people often talk across and around each other without being,
Yes.
are you talking about what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah.
and so for me, creativity is really channeling anything that's inherent within your energy into any form.
Mm,
So I feel that if you fill someone's water glass and you like to put it really, really carefully in front of them and put a little lemon on top, there's something about that being happening through the vessel of you that makes it inherently creative. And so I really want everyone to feel like they're creative because I think that's who we are. And that when we think about creativity as something that's siloed into kind of how elementary school silos it, like
mm,
creativity is art class and music class, but not math class. And not being organized or having proper grammar. Creativity is sort of associated with this like personality type.
yeah.
I think that's really damaging for us as a species and as individuals because everything around us is something someone created. The insurance system is someone's idea, and the political system is a series of different people's ideas. And I think when we remember everything is made up, then it allows us to be less passive. And I think for number one, for me, it's like I was really socialized to feel like when I don't understand something, it's because I'm not good at it.
Mm,
Whereas now I see that as maybe this thing doesn't actually make sense.
mm,
That's why I don't understand it.
wow.
And so the book is a lot about remembering that we don't have to exploit our creativity and that we don't have to produce to be creative all the time, but it's just a state of a relationship with an aspect of ourselves that is that wants to do things their own way. It's like a
Mm,
natural product of just being alive.
yeah. So did you feel that the process of writing this book was your process of getting clear on the definition of creativity, or did that come prior to this?
I think that it is actually the process of writing helped me understand my own definitions. I would also say, like, from a human design kind of jargony place, so forgive me if this is outside of anyone's scope of knowing, but I have the channel 6124 in my chart.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
So I find that when I look at a lot of my journals from like 10 years ago, that I'm talking about the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm trying to break through to where I can make it a concept that someone else can understand.
Right.
And so, in a way, I think I've always been doing this and I've always known it, but putting it onto paper helped me get clear, but also helped me get clear on how I could communicate this to
Mm,
someone else.
mm,
And I really feel like with human design, learning about how individual energy is here, like, really wants to try and impact the collective and a new possibility was so helpful to me because I realized yes, I need to be protective of how I think and what I truly believe, but also I'm inherently have a desire to be able to communicate it to other people.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I resonate with that so deeply, and especially that part where you were saying that you want to go back, kind of zoom out and clarify the definition for something. I resonate with that so deeply. And I don't have the 6124, but I've got the 61. And so that explains some things like why we're syncing up here. That's so different to think about creativity that way. And I can speak from experience. I'm sure all of us can, in saying that the way that creativity is typically framed can make us feel like we are less than. And so this is very freeing. And I also really enjoyed watching recently, you had, it was an Instagram challenge. Would you say it was a challenge? It was an 18-day, 19-day. Is that right?
Yeah, it was
Yes,
an
was it?
18-day series.
Okay.
It's funny because I modeled it after the Instagram challenge, but I very purposely didn't call it that because I wanted people to not push themselves.
Yeah. Right. That's nice. Okay. And so in this, you were very gently fostering ways of thinking, really, right? Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, I realized this thing a long time ago. So just in case anyone missed it, in the challenge, I just very intuitively picked 18 themes and I chose things based on the images that I tend to take when I'm taking a walk. So like,
Mm,
what do I kind of look at and what does it make me think about differently? So for example, I had started this practice in 2020 of taking images of light on water.
mm,
And I think of it as a different way of being able to look at sunlight because you can't obviously directly look into sun. But there was something about that practice that would change and shift the whole day for me after I did it. And so I wanted to be able to invite other people to have a similar experience, but without like constraining them and like do what I did because that worked for me because I know that doesn't work for everyone. So the gentle prompts were started with like one word. So for example, one day was tiny, and it was this idea that let's just look at things at a different scale and
mm,
change our perspective of what we're noticing to shift ourselves out of the subconscious programs we're always running that keep us in a place of habit, and seeing how that tiny shift has kind of that butterfly effect on how we see the rest of the world the rest of the time in that day.
yeah. This is so interesting. This is making me think. So I have on more than one occasion been doing a reading with someone in a session, and they have gate 1 or gate 41 in a really prominent placement, and they're asking me, and they are some sort of visual artist or creative person, and they're asking me, well, why can't I just be this person all the time? It's like I can't turn it on sometimes, and I can't get myself to create, and I can't get going and flowing. But the way that you are encouraging people to think about it and fostering their creativity seems so much more, it just seems so simple and pure that it's almost like you really can walk yourself into it, and there's no forcing, but you're thinking about creativity in such a different way. You're redefining it, and it's just like taking off the shackles of a former definition. And and I just kind of feel like this really could be something that people could walk themselves into and really tap into that very different and truly flowing creative part of themselves. Would you say that you can, when you think about it that way, you really can get yourself to tap into creativity in an intentional way?
Yeah, I think it's really tricky, and I'm so glad you brought this up because this is something I think I struggled with too for a long time with your clients who have the 1 and the 41. Like I realized that I had internalized this idea and definition of creativity, and that through internalizing this need to prove myself, I also have a completely undefined
Mm,
ego, will, heart centered, no activations at all. And I felt like I had to prove I was creative before.
yeah.
And when I was doing that, I was basically trying to exploit a part of myself that inherently has joy and levity and naturalness and isn't actually trying to please anyone else and doesn't even have an agenda. It's just, wouldn't it be fun if I thought about this way? Or, wow, I wonder what it would be like to walk a different way on the street. And why do I always walk the same way? And start to see, like, I think about our creativity. People always think of the product, right? So if
Yeah.
you're a writer, it's the book. And if you're a painter, it's the painting. But to me, like the first day of 18 days of inner creativity was perception or noticing. That was the prompt. Noticing is because writing is a product of your perception.
Yeah.
So you can be an amazing writer in terms of technical skills, maybe vocabulary and rhythm, and not ever be curious about the world. And therefore, what you are portraying or what you are putting out there doesn't reflect any new perspective. And to me, the perspective is the most interesting part of creativity. So I think when people are struggling, which I really identify with, it's often because they're trying to push a product without honoring the process. And I think creativity, one, is inherently a transformative trait, because when we create something, we let it go through us. I mean, I've never given birth to a child, but I imagine it's like this thing where you don't know what it is. Like, you're like, what is it gonna be? Like, I don't know anything about this. And I think that's the part of creativity that gets no honor. It's like, there's like some fable of Einstein receiving some of his ideas in dreams.
Right.
And it's like, we're not dreaming and we're not resting, and that's not part of our creativity. Or like nature, there's times to build things and then there's times to compost things, which we really don't allow, the cutting away in our culture. Then we just think we're always in the place of like pushing out the flower or pushing out the fruit. And there needs to be also roots, and things also need to die, and it's not right, I think, to ourselves to ask this question, which I feel inherent with your clients, which is sort of, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
nothing. It's just a process where you let things fall away. And maybe during that time, you're not producing all this stuff.
I'm so glad you brought up the undefined ego. That is such a huge part of, if you have it undefined, and even if you do have it defined, right, you're subject to conditioning, but especially if it's undefined, you can be prone to this sort of thing. And you also mentioning Einstein made me think about there's something else I think that he's maybe quoted as saying that when the genius would come through, that it was not him. And I think there are so many people that we consider genius that have said this sort of thing. It's not me, it just comes through me. And I think earlier when you were talking, you did use the word flow. And so I'm curious, how much of creativity do you see as flow or channeling? And how much do you see it being as something that really does come from inside of you?
Well, this is interesting. I think it actually relates to like the way I see the undefined and defined centers.
Okay.
And for me, I really think about the defined centers as like stuff that you can flow with, but from within. So there's still flow there, but the stimulus is kind of coming from inside the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I've seen people who are wildly creative who have tons of undefined centers. And
yeah,
for them, I think they're letting it in from the world or even other like layers of reality. I know many like very psychic people who have tons of undefined centers. I've just noticed it. And so sometimes it's like, maybe I'm tapping into your higher self or this tree or whatever it is. And I think actually the experience of it is not that different for us, whether it's coming from within or without. But what you didn't ask, but what I thought you were going to ask was something about like how much of it is us allowing and how much of it is us working, like doing, efforting. And I think that this is something I struggled with for so long because I used to have, I mean, sometimes it still pops up, but a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors because I felt people were always trying to control me to produce. And it's something I did to myself for years and years and years, like forcing myself to be constantly creating and constantly organizing. And I think at one point the switch kind of flipped and I started only wanting to do things when they were easy and flowy and in that state of receptivity. And now I realize it's more that I really want to embrace toggling that switch. So it's more like a wheel of like flow. And then you look at what you've made and you're like, okay, now with my agency and my effort and my intention, what do I want to design on purpose? And how do I need to tweak this? Or how do I need to do work and create effort to put this in the world where it needs to go, or to get it to where it can be the most impactful or feel the best to me. And I used to have those two aspects of self really in a big fight for a long, long time. And then one day I realized that that just was an illusion and it didn't have to be like that. And I started getting a little more confrontational with myself when I was doing too much kind of yin stuff or doing too much yang stuff, when I felt the imbalance. I could just feel.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, so you're emotionally defined, is that right?
Yes.
So would you say that that is perhaps the biggest part of you, the most consistent, definition in you that is creative, or do you see something else as playing a big role in this for you?
Well, what's interesting is, so some of the channels I have are the 1222, and I have gate 5 in the emotional center. So
Okay.
my creativity is very moody because those are visual emotional gates,
Yep.
And what I couldn't understand in the beginning of human design, like learning, was that the emotional center is spiritual, creative, and emotional and social awareness all in one space. Like I just didn't understand, but that is how I experience that.
Yeah.
When I'm with people, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I feel close to, I don't know, whatever it is, the universe, like God, like whatever, like I'm connecting to you, like this feels so good. And I feel that way when I'm writing, and I feel that way when I'm like in nature. It's one real feeling for me, but it also has a flip, and I notice it right away. And especially with my throat, the 1222, that's like a very extrovert, introvert, social, not social kind of energy. And when I'm in the mood to be with people, I find it like the most enlivening thing. But when I try to force myself to kind of be performative, that feels just so difficult for me. Like I just have such a chip on my shoulder. I feel so misunderstood when I try to force myself to share creativity when it's not time. Even when I'm alone, even if I was to like do an Instagram story, like if I do it once and I feel kind of depleted, I right away I'm like, this is not going to be good for anyone. So yes, I would say it is the strongest thing within me, and that I feel like it's from a very emotional, spiritual kind of like swept away mood. But also I very, very, very strongly feel my defined crown or head center. Like that is just, it's hyperactive, I think, in me to think. And so the way I have to let it out, like allow it to release some pressure, is to write things and share things. And then I feel like, okay, the air, I let a little air out of the balloon.
Yeah. That's such a nice way to say it. Yeah, I feel that. Wow. Okay. So I don't know a lot about this, but I know that in the past you had a storefront. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I'd love to know how that was a creative outlet for you.
Okay, I'm so happy you asked this question, because this is like really something for those MGs out there, because also as a 6-2 up until Saturn return, a lot of just try it vibes. So I for years found myself working for local businesses that were family owned. And for years, my parents were like, why do you just keep taking these like low paying, dead end, like jobs? And I was like, I don't know. This is what shows up for me. And I always want to do it. So I'm just going to do it.
Mhm.
And through that, working at like shoe stores, cafes, restaurants, bars, I realized, oh, I am learning that regular people run businesses and that it's not a different special kind of person that opens a shop or does a thing. It's just a person. And they do it through talking to each other and problem solving and researching. And they were all very DIY people. So I was sort of like absorbing that whole time unknowingly. And I was always, always the first one to have a job everywhere I went because the companies were so tiny that I would be the first manager. Like, there was no one to teach me anything. I was always had to teach myself. So that was another thing I had going for me is I was used to this idea of figure it out. There's no right or wrong way. Although there are hard ways and easy ways. So I kept looking at storefronts because I was so inspired to see that friends of mine who ran it, like that they, I say this with a lot of love, like they didn't know what they were doing as much as I felt I wouldn't know what I was doing. And there was something so empowering about that. So I was looking for storefronts for years before I could ever afford or was even interested in opening. I just wanted to know. So I just wanted to mention that in case anyone else out there finds themselves doing something strangely similar to that. And then one day, the perfect storefront of 2 blocks from my house that was the perfect size was just there. And I already knew everyone because I had worked up and down the block and I had tons of community. So I opened that space and the name Myths of Creation just popped into my head one day, like very suddenly. And at the time, it was a joke name because to me, I had learned so much about companies and fashion labels that make up stories about being sustainable, or we started out of a garage and we're just a quaint little company and we're all about innovation and, like the stories people tell. And I had learned a lot in the world of fashion about how so much of that is fake, how sometimes people say they have an in-house designer and they don't have an in-house designer. And I wanted to kind of like play with that idea and be like, what's a brand? And like, what am I saying about my value? And it was also something I did because in my neighborhood, there was nowhere I could afford to shop at the time. And so I really wanted to make a place that had none of that kind of nonsense. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
really open and transparent. But halfway through running the shop, I had a really, really highly impactful session with a psychic, maybe around 2015.
Okay.
And it just changed everything about how I saw the world. And so in the beginning, I was like, I care about affordability and being unique and being an individual. And I would also mention I had always been given jobs in fashion, even though I never went to school for it. So I think that's where the 2 comes in the 6-2 profile is I was just like, I can do this because in my mind, like, it's very like, why not? Like, I think this is all made up. I would never read a rule book about what to wear. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I went from this like individuality championing, like, more affordable, accessible community offerings to being a highly spiritually interested person. We started learning more and more about why certain things cannot be, $20 and who gets harmed in the process when we sell things at a price where people can't get paid for their labor, or we're creating more plastics that harm the earth. And so halfway through that, running it, everything in my like kind of mission shifted. And I was like, oh no, like, what am I going to do? Like, how can I be affordable, but still be like responsible? And how can I keep championing individuality when I'm so connected to spirituality? And like, how am I going to, I just wasn't as attached to the clothes, And then one day I realized that I could be really playful with everything after the psychic reading. Um, and I guess I just would add what I was told during that reading. The one thing I remember really, really well is that I was told like the universe was not with me, and that I had been prayed over so many times by different people in my family to just like be protected from like being, I guess I was just like kind of a weird kid, like being seen too much or like over the top too much. And just, I think I was raised in a very Catholic household.
Okay.
I think they just wanted me to be like, to basically be unseen by anything outside of me. And I felt that way. I felt like
Hmm.
everything I do is on my own. Everything I have to make happen in the world, I have to make happen. And I
Yeah.
would just like work myself till basically almost collapse, like just consistently and constantly. So anyway, as I shifted into this like understanding of what could it feel like to be co-creative and to not make things so hard and to like see what's showing up for me and to go towards what I love and to really try to like embody what's important to me at all times, the shop afforded me all these different ways of doing that. So I started like working with people who never made stuff before. It was like
Mm.
handle, and I would help them develop their product and I would carry it in the shop. And some of these people went on to like open their own shops or like develop this as like a really big part of their business. And I also started having tons of spiritual events. Like I had my friend Courtney do astrology readings, mini 15-minute readings in the store every like once a month on a Sunday. And I know I'm going on and on, but I
No, those are
wanted
great. That's perfect.
thank you. But what I loved about that was like there were people who wouldn't walk into like a spiritual healing center, but they
Mm.
would come into a clothing store, you know?
Yeah.
And we could kind of be very gentle with them in inviting them to tickle their curiosity. And I remember as soon as I started mentioning to people that I saw psychic, because I was like just so excited about it, I was telling like strangers, you have to do it. Like 40-50% of the people I talked to in my shop, which mostly identify as women, were like, oh, I have a body worker. Like I don't talk to people about it, but they help me, do this spiritual work. Or I have a numerologist I work with. Like almost everyone was telling me that
Mm.
they were also deeply spiritual people, but that it was very, very private because they were a little like embarrassed, I
Yeah.
think. But anyway, so the creativity sort of became about like how to create experiences,
Mm.
instead of just creating products.
Which kind of wraps us back around to what you said earlier about the undefined ego. That's so good. That's so helpful for people. I think if people can take just that and go forward and think about creativity as a process and a journey instead of a product, then that can really change things for people. Yeah. So do you have, I'm just curious about your chart now because I've never seen it, but it seems like you do really have some kind of the support circuitry, the like I'm just hearing like 214 and community stuff. I don't know what it is in you, but it seems like you do really have this way of and you said you have the 55, but you don't have the 39?
I have the 55, but not the
Not the
39.
39. There's
Yeah.
just something in you that seems very supportive and can kind of like encourage creativity in other people and encourage authenticity. And maybe that's the 1222 in you. Maybe that's some of it. But
Mm.
it does seem like you just have such a knack for waking people up to their heart. And I think so much of creativity is heart, it's authenticity, it's letting that flow and just channeling that sort of thing come through. If you seen this, are you seeing this in your life? Is it pretty clear to you the way that you affect people and impact people, especially when you were talking about your emotional experience and the 1222 specifically? Do you see how you impact people when it is right and when you are in the mood, do you see what happens to people?
I'm so glad you asked this question, because this is a real 6-2 thing. Also, like, um, I have always felt very like, I don't know, I'm the oldest of 3 sisters, and I'm a lot like my mom, and I always felt very nurturing. Like, I
Mm.
don't know, like, I want to take care of you. Like, I
Yeah.
want to help you. Like, when I would take like business classes with people and they would drop something, I would like pick it up and they'd be like, why are you taking care of me like this? And I just feel like I know what I'm gonna cry, which always
Oh,
happens, but I know
oh,
what it
it's
feels
okay.
like to feel so uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
again, like a first gen immigrant. I remember being in school and like telling my mom, like, did you know that some people hang out with people that aren't their cousins? Because I only hang out with my cousins. Like, I didn't
Oh,
know people were allowed or like interested in hanging out with other people. And there was just so much stuff I didn't understand.
right.
And I always just kind of felt like, if I have the option of helping other people not go through what I went through, if I could
Yeah.
shortcut them just by sharing, then
Yeah.
I would like to do that, because I wish someone had done that for me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it. But I also think that in terms of impact, I also have the 10-20, and that's
Mm.
a lot about talking, I think, about self-acceptance, but working it out as you're talking, like learning what you're going to say as you're saying it, And so
Right.
I'm usually unaware between the 6-2 and the 10-20 of the impact I have until someone tells me.
Mm.
And honestly, I think that I remember reading one day someone I really looked up to or thought of as superhuman. It might have even been like Oprah or someone like that. I don't remember, but they were explaining how terrified they were every
Mm.
time they got up to do certain things. And I remember just being like mind blown that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the like
Yeah.
overcoming of fear. And I felt like I have to tell people, like, one, I really wanted to be a model of being like brave and courageous and sharing, but also I wanted to tell the truth about how terrifying it is for me
Mm.
at
Mhm.
times, so other people could get that feeling I got when I saw my friends run their business, which is like, oh, we're not different, you're
Mhm.
just doing
Mhm.
it. And
Yeah.
so I find that when people tell me on Instagram or something that they've been impacted by something I've said or done, I've had people tell me who I've talked to one time, like 6 years later, like, remember when you said this thing to me? Like, I moved to
Yes.
Berlin because you were like, go for it. And I was like, I don't remember that. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that, because I think I'm kind of better at it when there's no pressure
Mhm.
to deliver anything for them too. Like, I heard very recently someone say it's like none of our business how much we're impacting other people. Like, um to manipulate how their experience is of us is actually like dilutes what we have to offer and
Mm.
disempowers that person from receiving it how they need to. And that's really hard, I think, for us as readers.
Yeah.
Want to just do a good job, or just anyone.
Right.
But it helps me because it's like what you're saying, your question, even like I don't really think about
Right.
it.
Right. Which makes total sense. But it also shows how you do this thing very naturally that almost all of us are doing, arguably all human beings are doing, where we're giving to other people what we wish we had been given and what we don't want. We're trying to fix things for other people in these various ways in our lives and trying to heal ourselves in that way too, and giving to others and taking care of others. And it makes me think that that is something that you are also doing with your work and your teachings on creativity, that you're setting people free and how they think about creativity. And gosh, wouldn't it would have been nice if somebody had given that to you so that you could have been nicer to yourself, and now other people can be nicer to themselves and thinking about about creativity too, and how it is so natural and human and we're all creative, and that's really that really is powerful. So I'm curious, what does your day-to-day look like in creativity, or what does a week look like in your life?
So this is a challenging question for me because I have such a bad sense of time. Like, I don't know
Okay.
what it is, but I talk about this a lot, that I really don't see time as linear. I think of things as like cycles.
Mm,
And even in my book, I think I wrote somewhere that like I have a really bad sense of direction because I look at the world like poems. So I remember like moments, and everything kind of bleeds into each other. But for practical purposes, I would say the things that really anchor me are a couple things. One, I'm an MG, so I actually do have other work that I do in support of other people. I don't just do readings and my writing full time, but that really helps me because I kind of want to be, it helps me to kind of shift my focus, you know what I mean, away
mm,
from one specific thing that really feels good to me. And the other thing I would say is that I have gotten a little better about kind of taking my list of goals in life, like for my whole like I would love to write a book, I would love to do this and that. And this is through a projector coach that I work with, actually starting to understand that these things connect to my everyday choices,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but not in a way that's debilitating, because before I
Right.
did it in a way that was debilitating, so I just
Mm,
basically gave up
mm,
in a lot of ways. And just starting to see, and this is a lot of also what the book is about, is if you say you love to sing, are you singing? Not
yes.
are you making an album? Not are you, you know, recording? Are you singing? You know, I
Yes.
say I love to write. Am I writing? And I just try and remember that that's what I love to do the most. And the only person stopping me from doing that thing is really me. And I also try to keep things really easy, which is to say, you know, instead of saying write a book today, why don't you just put a time frame down that feels good, and sit and write. And the other thing I would say is that, you know, I don't know if this is going to be a permanent thing in my life, but I spend a great deal of time listening to people, podcasts, writing, teachers, whoever it is that inspires me. And I think that this is because there were 30 some odd years of my life where I did not allow myself to just connect to my own spiritual education, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Hmm.
And so that really helps me stay in the flow of, you know, I don't know any other word for it, but it's like possibility and magic, where I can see
Yeah.
every second of my life as this like miraculous potential.
Yes.
You know, instead of like, oh, I got to do this again and that again, and you know, the routine of being alive sometimes.
Yeah.
And that helps me contextualize the world and wonder all the time.
Mm, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I think is so helpful, and it's so easy and so simple. And I was talking just last night with my partner about a similar idea about how we can be inspired by these really big labels or really big goals, you know, of like you were saying, if you enjoy singing, but you're stuck on wanting to record and create an album and, you know, be the best ever, that sort of thing, that can really be debilitating, kind of like you were saying. And maybe that's what you were experiencing in your day to day, just kind of just like, how do I get going? And I know it's overwhelming, but if you do focus on the part of it that you enjoy, and little by little you embrace that in your day to day, that does walk you in a certain direction, or at least it fills your cup, right? It is a spiritual practice of some sort. And that is amazing advice.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, of course. And thank you for reflecting that back to me. But you just reminded me of something that happened earlier this year for me, which, or maybe last year, but I realized that I needed to change my relationship with discipline.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I was going to ask you about this actually. So go for it. Perfect.
I think largely, and I do want to mention there is a community that I've been part of called Space by Mama Medicine that helped me with this a lot, I think. But a lot of it was understanding that trying to create discipline from a place of scarcity, which is a place of not enoughness,
Yeah.
feels different to me than creating discipline because I'm grateful and because I want to take care of
Yes.
my gifts, or take care of my life, or take care of my time,
Right.
And
Right.
I hugely, hugely struggled with self-care. I mean, even that term feels very hard for me to say. It just feels
Mm,
so, I don't know, like commercialized now or
mm,
something.
yeah.
Like self-care is $12 smoothies. Like, is um, and even as we're talking, I know that no matter what, actually, most of the time, I'll say no matter what, but most of the time, if I take a walk outside and because I live in Brooklyn and I see trees, birds, water, anything in nature, that I feel so incredible. And it only takes 10 minutes. And it's something I almost never make time for because, one, I love to do what I'm doing. I love to work. I'm very entertained listening to my various things. I'm a caves environment person.
Oh, okay.
um, but two, I think it's like I have this unconscious belief that I have to earn things, like they're a
Mm.
special occasion or something like
Oh my
that.
gosh. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh no, this is just taking care of my life. Like, this is taking care of my vibration, my frequency, my spirit, my heart, and my body all at once. And instead of being like, why didn't you walk today? You should have moved today. You're bad. All the things that we are taught to say to ourselves, I'm like, oh, you love doing that. Like, I wonder how I can entice you into taking care of yourself. And I'll be like, okay, on Sundays, I buy flowers or whatever I kind of need to get myself to do to make it feel like it's part of my, I don't know, it's grounded in something. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
grounded. So I think that when I went from understanding that I am actually just so grateful to be alive and to know the people that I know and to be as curious and inspired as I am all the time, I started being less of a bully to
Mm-hmm.
myself with the
Right.
creative practice and started being like, oh, no, like it just changes you when you engage with the thing. There's no wrong
Mm-hmm.
way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really shifts your perspective on what you're valuing instead of putting the scarcity above everything else and the guilt that you give to yourself, and but really truly valuing your time and your life and your emotional health. Yes, 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 yes. I love that. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I want to ask you if you have anything you'd like to share with us that I didn't ask you about before we go.
I guess, yeah, I started doing this series called Commune very recently, and it's a series of interviews where I just ask people questions who inspire me. And the
Mm,
purpose of it is also at the end, we touch on the person's human design. It's not so different than what we're doing here, but it's because I think human design is really heady and esoteric and it's fun. But there's something about just sitting with people and being like, that person's a 3-5 projector and they told this story, or they did this thing that feels a little bit more, one, communal, and two, embodied. Like, we can start to
mm,
make our own ideas about what projectors feel like to us or that kind of thing.
yeah,
So that's something I'm trying to do monthly, but I did want to mention that.
amazing. I think I'd maybe seen that on your website, but wasn't sure what it was. So thank you for clarifying that and letting everybody know about it. That's great. So, okay, everybody go check Xenia out, please. She's on Instagram at Myths of Creation. She has a website. She's a fantastic reader. I actually had somebody come to me after getting a reading with you once, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool! I love this." I just thought it was so special that she told me that. It felt really cool to be connected with you in that way.
That's so fun.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, Xenia. I'm really excited to put this out into the world. And yes, I want everybody to go check out her book too. The Universe is an Art Project. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Cameron. This has been amazing.
Thank you.